John, what you just did? I just said good morning. You got me hooked on good morning. Um, well, it's morning somewhere. We'll be missions minded. Our missionaries over in Africa, Korea, our Korean missionaries. It's morning over there. So good morning to them if they're watching. But good evening, everyone else. We're going to be in the book of Proverbs, chapter 15. And we're continuing our studies, going verse by verse here through the book of Proverbs, and looking at what makes someone wise. And it's not, I've accomplished all these things that makes me wise. It's, what are the habits of a wise person? And how can I develop those habits in my life? Okay? Developing a habit doesn't start by saying, hey, I think I should be working out, so today I'm going to go to the gym and work out for 3 hours. Okay, if that's your first workout in 3 years, it'll probably be your last workout in 3 years, because you're going to be in pain for a week and a half, and it's not going to work well. But saying, hey, I'm gonna go by the gym every day this week. I just drive by it. Hey, there's the gym. Now I'm in the habit of driving by. Now I'm going to go into the gym. Okay, you're building those habits, and so we're building these habits of wisdom. I want to look at a habit of wisdom that involves with how far in the future we look. And we're going to look at Proverbs 15, verses 19 through 24. The Bible says, Proverbs chapter 15, verse 19, "The way of the slothful man is as an hedge of thorns, but the way of the righteous is made plain. A wise man maketh a glad father, but a foolish man despiseth his mother. Folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom, but a man of understanding walketh uprightly. Without counsel, purposes are disappointed, but in a multitude of counselors they are established. A man hath joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good is it? The way of life is above to the wise, that he may depart from the hell beneath." And you see the example here of a wise person and a foolish person. The foolish person, they get their joy, their enjoyment, their excitement out of the short term. Today, this is going to make me happy. The wise person looks to the future. I mean, yes, they look all the way to the future in heaven, but they also look at tomorrow, next week, next morning, next year. What is going to be the result of my actions? And the habit of wisdom that we want to look at today is looking ahead. Anyone ever play chess competitively? Okay. I can't say that I ever did. But my dad took my older siblings to chess club at one time, and he was a good chess player and read books about really good chess players. And he said that the really good chess players, they are playing like 5, 6, 7 moves ahead. They're thinking, if I go here, he's going to go there, then I'll go here, then he'll go here, then I'll go here, and he'll go here. And they're not looking at the board the way it is right now. They're looking at what the board's going to look like in 5 moves. And they're realizing, if I shift this here, this is what's going to happen. So I can think 5 moves ahead, and I do all this crazy things, and I wind up getting to jump his bishop. And that gives me the lead in the game. Okay? The master chess players, they're thinking lots of moves ahead. And wisdom would show we need to think further ahead. Okay? A lot of people today, and I'd say all of us at times, we have this, and they say we live in a fast food culture. It's not just because we do have McDonald's, it's just we want stuff, we want it now. Okay? It used to be if you were going to eat a meal out somewhere, you had to be willing to sit down and wait till they cooked it. Okay? And you weren't in such a rush. We weren't trying to get 18 things done each day. Today I felt like I was, I don't know how many miles I burnt, just driving from one place to another place, out to Minnesota, back, to one store, to another store, back to West Salem, back out to Alaska, back and forth. And back 100 years ago, a trip out to Minnesota, I mean, that might be once a year. Got to cross the Mississippi. I'm going to have to wait till it freezes or find a boat somewhere. A trip from Toma to West Salem, I mean, that wouldn't be that common. But even from West Salem to Alaska, that's an all-day trip, riding your wagon over the hill and back. And when we, in our schedules, we want to get 12 things done in a day, it used to be a lot slower. And I'm not saying that doing more things is bad, but when we think of, hey, I can get all these things done and it's done right now, I want it, I get it, it's done. We need to say, hey, if I'm doing this, what is going to be the effect of what I did today, tomorrow, the next day, the day after that? And the flesh says, I'm going to enjoy my day more if I ignore what, it talks about parents, talks about counselors here. So we'll say that. If I ignore what my parents and my counselors have said, okay? And you say, well, is this addressed to young people? Well, yes, but if any of you here feel like you're an older person, how much of your life, the things that your parents told you at one point in your life, still apply to you today? Okay? Have any of you realized that some of that wisdom still applies today? Right? The foolish person, the flesh says, hey, I'm going to have more joy if I ignore what they say. I feel like this is going to be good. I'm just going to do it right now. Okay? And that's what it says. And the folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom. Okay? But if I ignore this, they say and they do what they want. They lounge around. They don't work when they need to work. They say, this is going to give me more joy. The wise person says, I know that in the long run, my joy will be greater if I'm diligent in my work, seeking to honor God and the counselors that he has given in my life with what I do, with what I say. The wise person understands that my joy, my net joy, is going to be greater if I do this. Yeah, I'm giving away some of the fun stuff that I want to do right now, but it's going to be much better down the road if I do. Okay? That's just a basic tenet of wisdom. Even non-Christians understand this principle, okay? That if you don't live for the day, you're going to have more in the long run, okay? But it's very clear in the Bible. And the difference between biblical wisdom and non-Christian wisdom in this, delayed gratification is this, okay? We look even further than they can look. We can look at tomorrow, we can look at next year, we can look at retirement age, we can look at later in our life and say, hey, yes, those drugs might be fun now, but what's that going to do to my lungs later in my life? What's that going to do to my mental state? What's that going to do to my financial state, okay? We can look at that. But we can also say, what is this going to look like in eternity? What is this going to look like as I stand before God, right? We can look with faith where they can't. So I want us to look at three aspects of this, the contrast here. And the first is the bliss of willing ignorance. Okay? How many have heard the expression, ignorance is bliss? Okay? Well, what does that mean in your own terms? Somebody. Ignorance is bliss. Okay, you're happier if you don't know the bad stuff? Okay. Yeah. Right. If your kids are eating the last pound of flour that you have, and there's no more food after this is their last meal, and we're going to starve to death, they're happier if they don't know that that's their last meal. They'll just eat it, okay? But there's a point at which we need to know things, and there are people who they're willingly ignorant. And I get that phrase from the book of Peter, 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 5. I'm going to turn there really quick to read it and get a little bit of context here. 2 Peter, he's talking about people who are denouncing God, that are fighting against God. and talking about, I'm looking at First Peter, I'm like, this isn't the right one. Talking about people who rejected God and in the end times. Says in chapter 3, verse 3, it says this, knowing this first, that there shall come in the last days scoffers walking after their own lusts and saying, where is the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. For this they willingly are ignorant of, that by the word of God the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water, whereby the world that then was, being overflowed with water, perished. But the heavens and the earth, which are now by the same word, are kept in store, reserved unto fire against the day of judgment and perdition of ungodly men. What is this saying? There are people who are willingly ignorant of the fact that God created the heavens and the earth, and God absolutely judged mankind with a cataclysmic judgment over the entire world. Okay? They're like, well, where is the evidence of any judgment of that? Okay? We live in what's called the driftless region. Okay? It's one speck. If you look at a satellite map, it's a really small area right around this area where we have some hills and bluffs and stuff. The only area in hundreds of miles that isn't scraped bare by glaciers. Well, how does that have to do with judgment? Those glaciers were the aftermath of the flood. Just basic physics. If you rain enough water on Earth, that much condensation, it's going to has a massive temperature change, which is then going to pendulum the other way. You're going to get a massive cold era. Okay, a global flood would have to cause an ice age. Okay, the remaining flood water as glaciers getting scraped across the ground, scraped huge scars. If you get up in an airplane, fly over this area, away from just outside of the driftless area here, you'll see scars across the plains, and then these hills at the edge where all of the top 20 feet or so of soil was just scraped off and piled up there, okay? How can you look at that much cataclysmic judgment and say, well, God never judges anything? People who stand in the Grand Canyon and say, God never judges anything. People who see the craters of massive volcanoes, God never judges anything. People look at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean and see how it's torn in half. God never judges anything. Okay? Every part of this earth is covered with a record. I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that there are billions of dead things that were fossilized, buried so fast that they turned into stone. Well, maybe we can come up with a theory that over hundreds of thousands of years, a peat bog there, and it landed there, and everything got eroded, except for the bones. They magically stayed there, and over long centuries, they turned into stone. You know what that's called? When they're scraping at the barrel, trying to come up with an alternative reality theory for how these billions of things died? Willingly ignorant. For by this they are willingly ignorant. You know, and they say that where is the promises coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were from the beginning of the creation. Continue as they were from the beginning of creation. I teach science over at the Christian school here. There's a theory called uniformitarianism, a geological uniformitarianism, saying that the present is key to the past. If you want to know how something happened in the past, look at what's going on right now. That same process at that same level and intensity is what caused the things in the past. British geologist or archaeologist named Charles Lyell was studying a river valley in South America, and he wrote a book about this, right? And where he said, hey, this little creek in the bottom of this huge canyon, I can measure that, hey, it's digging out like, a quarter inch every year. Well, that means it would have taken this many hundreds of thousands of years for this little tiny creek to form this huge canyon. And he published that book in the 1800s, and one young scientist, failed theology student, was going out on a ship to the Galapagos Islands to do some study, and that was his favorite book. Studying this right there, for since the fathers slept, for all things continue as they were from the beginning of creation. There is no cataclysmic events. Okay? It's a belief saying there is no catastrophe. No catastrophes happened. Okay? The huge canyons were formed over millions of years. Well, then Darwin took that theory, then he went to the Galapagos Islands, and he looked at something that had already been well documented, the genetic variation, okay? Farmers had been doing that for centuries, intentionally making different breeds of cattle by selective crossbreeding. When they showed up in South America, they had corn, maize. There's none of that in the fossil record because ears of corn, those didn't exist. That's a GMO. All corn is a genetically modified organism by the Mayans in ancient Peru, okay? Thousands of years before Christ. They understood that science already. Darwin took it, he eloquently stated it, looking at the variations of the different finches on the different islands, and said, hey, these finches in the islands where they could only eat nuts had extra strong beaks for cracking nuts. And there were no genes left in their gene pool for the extra long beaks for going into flowers, or the sharp beaks for cutting fruit, or the beaks that are good for catching insects. And he documented genetic variation. Then he combined it with uniformitarianism, Charles Lyell's theory, exactly stated by Peter 1,800 years earlier, saying that they'll say, where's the promise of his coming? For since the fathers fell asleep, all things continue as they were. He says, okay, this process as they were, this slow process of this, what if that caused bigger changes from one species to another? Then he put out the theory of evolution, which was also very old. The ancient Greeks had that similar theory. But he just now took uniformitarianism, which was totally debunked by archaeologists, and they've seen that it was all caused by catastrophe, applied it on top of genetic variation, called it evolution, and said that that caused all of the genes of all the different species, okay? It's interesting how Peter exactly said this is going to be the base core philosophy in the end times. And Paul said, beware the opposition of science falsely so called. Okay? It's going to come. Willingly ignorant. They're standing in the craters. They drove to work burning fossilized sinners. Okay? This is not just dinosaurs that was in that oil. Okay? Let's just be honest. Okay? It's not, okay, yeah, if you're bad, Santa Claus is going to bring you coal. No. The bad people got turned into coal. All right? This is the judgment of the flood. All right? And people drive in burning evidence of God's global judgment as we come to work. All right? And then they say, where's the promise of his coming? Nothing's ever changed. There's no evidence of judgment. As we sit in this area surrounded by scarred oceans. Okay? Willingly ignorant. Because I want to be happy. And if I don't think about that, I'll be happier today. Hey, look, I can take this white powder and it makes it so I don't have to think about that anymore. I'm happy for this moment. Okay? That's the core philosophy. Okay? If they're blissfully ignorant of what's going to happen if they're slothful? Hey, I am happier if I stay in bed rather than go to work. So I'm not going to go to work today. It'll make me happy. And that's, after all, the most important thing, right? Me be happy, right? Nothing bad's going to happen, okay? Uncle Sam's got my back. I don't have to work, all right? And they're slothful. That's what verse 19 says. I'll go back to Proverbs here. Sorry. And shall deliver Zebedee. That's the wrong chapter. All right. The way of the slothful man is as a hedge of thorn. The lazy person, they're like, hey, I'll just be slothful. In fact, I'll not just be slothful, I'll be disrespectful, because it's a lot more fun to mouth off at my parents rather than say, yes, ma'am, yes, sir. Okay, verse 20, a wise son maketh a glad father, but a foolish man despiseth his mother. Like, I don't want to listen to what she has to say. I'm going to have more fun if I don't. If I ignore what mom and dad said, hey, I got up this morning and didn't make my bed. I threw my clothes on the floor and didn't pick them up. Well, okay. At some point, that's going to accumulate. Oh, yeah, I have dirty clothes, and I'm late for work. The slothful person, the foolish person, they're like, hey, it's more fun in the moment if I don't listen to all that. Okay? Their folly. They want to run to that folly. Look at verse 21. It says, folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom. Folly is joy to him. So something that you say, this is a horrible idea, but it's so much fun. Okay? That's why they call it joy riding. Okay? There's no joy after a joyride. When it's done, however it ends, now if you're lucky, you just got caught and you're in big trouble. Okay? There's lots of unlucky people in joyrides. There's a funeral. Okay? You say, that's folly, that's a horrible idea, don't do that. But the fool, it's like, hey, that looks fun, let me do it. I'm not going to consider at all about the consequences, I just want to do it, it looks like fun. Oh man, everybody's drinking that stuff and they're having a good time, I'll drink some of it. Everyone's snorting that stuff, whatever it is they do. They're all shooting up with that stuff and they look like they're happy. Wow, I'm going to go do it. Listen, to the fool, the stuff that you'd say, this is a horrible idea, that is their joy. They're like, this is the most exciting thing in the world. This is going to give me true fulfillment. But they're looking at the very, very short term. Okay? In verse 20 and 22, it says this. It says, a wise son maketh glad father. So talking about parents. 22, without counsel, purposes are disappointed. The foolish person is going to say, hey, I don't need to ask anybody their input. I can just make my own decisions. I don't need counsel. I don't need to talk to you about that. I'm just going to go do it. I don't need to talk to my parents. I'm married. I don't need to talk to my wife about it. I'll just go do it. Honey, I bought a new car. You what? Honey, I took out a second mortgage on the house. Listen, getting counsel is a really good idea. Okay? But a fool is like, no, I don't want to talk to anybody else about what I want to do. I just want to do it. I'm going to be my own boss. Okay? It's a foolish idea because you need to have that counsel. You need to have that. But a fool is going to despise all other wisdom input, whereas a wise man is going to look for that. Verse 23, the fool says, hey, I have a lot more joy in life because I can say whatever I want. Verse 23 says, a man hath joy by the answer of his mouth, and a word spoken in due season, how good is it? A fool says, hey, I can just say whatever I want. That's going to be more enjoyable. As opposed to, hey, what's the good of a word spoken in due season? The fool, they're just like, hey, I'll say whatever I want, do whatever I want, whenever I want. I'm not going to talk to anybody about it or ask anybody's permission or care about the consequences. I'm just going to do it. Or not do it if I feel like not doing it. Okay? And in their mind, that's how they get the most joy. Okay? They are ignorant. They're willingly ignorant. The way of life is above to the wise, they may depart from the help of many. The foolish person, ignorance is bliss. Even if they know there's truth, they're going to find some way of putting a question mark where God put a period. Hath God said that you'll surely die if you eat that? Okay, yes, he did. Okay? Is there really going to be a consequence for this? I can sleep in another 5 minutes. I'm just going a little bit over the speed limit. They're not going to catch me. My parents don't know what they're talking about. That's old-fashioned counsel. Listen, when people are coming up with those reasons to be ignorant, to ignore what's right in front of them, that's foolishness. okay, when they're looking at what's going to give me happiness in the next 5 minutes, that's foolishness, okay? Because I want us to look at the pain of the ignorant. There's the bliss of the ignorant, but there's a second side to it. There's the pain, okay? Verse 19. The path of the ignorant, it is hard and it is painful. Verse 19 says, the way of the slothful man is as a hedge of thorns. Verse 21, his folly is joy to him that is destitute of wisdom, but a man of understanding walketh uprightly. It's talking about our pathway, our direction in life. Where are we going? What are we doing? Okay? Proverbs 3 says this, in all their ways acknowledge him, or depart from him, Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. Okay? If we're trusting in God, we're acknowledging him in everything, he's going to guide and direct our paths and give us a clear direction of where we're going. A foolish person who's rejected all of that, okay? The slothful person, their way is as a hedge of thorns. Okay? In Bible times, barbed wire fence wasn't something you'd go down to Ace Hardware and buy, 800 feet of barbed wire and then go out there and stretch it. Okay? You didn't have, that steel wiring that would have been worth more than its weight in gold at that time. But if you wanted a fence, okay, usually you'd clear out your pasture, you take all the rocks, put them on the barrier, but then you would plant a hedge of thorn bushes. And over the years, you'd cultivate that and get that thicker and thicker. You'd get this thick hedge. We've got this pretty thick hedge of arborvitaes right here, okay? But the thorn bushes would be more of intertwining. It'd make it almost impossible to get through, and it'd be all full of thorns, okay? It makes a pretty effective fence, okay? It's going to take them a while to chop through that whole thing or burn through that whole thing to get through. Yeah, an army could do it, but a thief isn't going to get through that. Much more effective than a barbed wire fence, okay? A foolish man, a slothful man, if they're trying to go somewhere, it's like, man, I can never keep a job. Well, what do you do? He's like, well, I got hired, and then a week later they called me and said I was fired. Well, what'd you do? Well, I didn't do anything. What did you do when you get into work? I didn't go into work. I just got the job. Well, there's your problem. Hey, if you don't work, or it's like, yeah, I went to work, and they were upset because I was on my phone the whole time. Well, yeah, they didn't want to pay you to read your Facebook posts. They want to pay you to work. And a slothful man, you're going to be walking into this hedge of thorns. It's going to be, you're never getting anywhere, and it hurts. Okay? And that's the pain. People have loss of direction. People are like, I don't know where I'm going. You look at young people these days. It used to be people would say, hey, this is what I'm going to do. This week, this month, next month, in 3 years, I'm going to go be here. 5 years, I'm going to be going to this college. I'm going to graduate. I'm going to get this. I'm going to internship over here. Then I'm going to go over here. This is my dream job. I want to live in this area. They have these dreams. People don't dream anymore. They don't. They have AI algorithms that guide them through social media. And there's no time for dreaming. Their biggest dream is, oh man, how can I get as many likes as this person? That's their dream. It's the short term. Okay? Instant gratification. They don't show you what happens in 5 years. That person that was super popular 5 years ago. Who is that person? They never show you that. And people don't have a vision. They don't have a direction. We need guidance, and foolishness is going to give us no guidance. It'll give us disappointment. It says in verse 22, without counsel, purposes are disappointed. Okay? And someone says, hey, I want to be a doctor when I grow up. That's awesome. Have you talked to your parents about what it's going to take? Well, no. Have you talked to your school counselor about, hey, what's it going to take, when I get through? Well, no. Have you talked to your math teacher about what it's going to take to pass your math class? Well, no. Have you talked to anybody about this? Well, no. 10 years later, man, I always wanted to be a doctor, just things didn't work out. Well, why didn't it work out? Well, I failed pre-algebra, and then I dropped out at 8th grade. Well, didn't you talk to anybody about it? No. There's your problem. You didn't get any counsel, and your plan didn't work. Maybe you have a different plan. Maybe you did get through college. Maybe you got through high school, and you're like, hey, I want this business to work really well, so I'm going to get a bunch of business loans and start this business, and boom, I owe $500,000, and my business just dropped out beneath me. What's going on here? Well, did you actually talk to anybody in that industry, ask how it works? Well, no. Without counsel, purposes are disappointed. And that counsel, it specifically said earlier, your parents were your counselors. There's an implied that God is your counselor. And there's this also here of seek other counselors. Talk to people. Get wisdom. Because they can help you see what you haven't seen. Someone else who's built a business, they know the struggles you're going to face, can say, hey, maybe you want to do something like this. Have you thought about this? What are you going to do about this? Okay? Someone who's maybe been a parent before, if you want to get married and be a parent and have a family, maybe talking to, I don't know, your parents. What are things I need to think about? Well, do you have a job? No. Do you have a house? No. Do you have a plan? No. But I love her. Okay, well, get those other things together before you go get married. It's going to help you out in the long run. I sat down with my father-in-law when I was asking if I could marry his daughter. And he's like, well, you guys are adults. You can get married. You don't have to ask me. I was like, well, I want to. It's like, oh, do you want my blessing? Like, well, yeah. It's like, well, if you want my blessing, he pulls out this typed up sheet of paper. Now, if you want my blessing, here's some things, okay? You need to have a job, making adequate money. You have to have health insurance. You have to have adequate transportation. You need to have at least $5,000 in a savings account. I'm like, ugh. This was like, just a week or so after I graduated college. So I'm like, well, I'm having an interview this week. I didn't really have stuff set up. I didn't have a car at the time. I didn't have health insurance at the time. So I had a lot of things to go. I had, I think, $200 in my account, which is as much as I had at the beginning of college. But I didn't have any debt, praise the Lord. It was tough listening to that counsel. 2 years after we got married and you were moving from Illinois out to Washington State and transmission blew 400 miles into the trip. Like, 2 days and $2,000 later. I wish it was only $2,000 to fix the transmission now. You know what I did? I called my father-in-law and I said, thank you. It was stressful enough having a move. But after we'd already paid the movers and all this other stuff, it's like I could write a check for the $2,000 and I knew it was going to go through. Thank you, Dad. I'm glad I listened. Okay? Without counsel, purposes are disappointed. But in a multitude of counsel is safety. There's disappointment. An ultimate danger of living this life of foolishness, of I'll have more joy now, is verse 24. The way of life is above to the wise, that he may depart from hell beneath. We can see in the future, beyond this life, it is appointed unto man once to die, but after that the judgment. So Christ was once offered to bear the sins of many. The wise person will go to Christ. But going to Christ, I just have more joy and enjoyment right now, not admitting that I'm a sinner. To go to Christ means I have to admit that I'm a sinner, admit that there's judgment. If I admit that there's such a thing as right and wrong and judgment, then all those other fun things I like doing, they won't be as fun anymore. So I will block God out of my existence and just have fun in the world today. Eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die. But what about after tomorrow? What about the judgment? Ignorance is bliss up to a moment. At that last moment, it is not bliss. And we can see not just tomorrow, the next month, we can see an eternity to come. And we can see the wisdom is coming to Christ, being humble and realizing it. And I want to talk in the last 5 minutes about long-term joy. There's a clear path for the righteous. Verse 19 there, the way of the slothful man is as a hedge of thorn, but the way of the righteous is made plain. The way of the righteous is made plain. My pathway, it seems clear. It's like, man, you just born under a lucky star. You got a promotion, and then another promotion, and then another promotion, and then another promotion. How come you keep getting promoted? I work. Huh? I was sitting at one place that had given me a promotion after my first year there, and I was assistant manager for the tax office I was in, but they didn't want me to say that to anyone because everybody was like 10 years older than me there. And, I was sitting there working, and because everybody would still ask me questions, like, how does this work? What do I do here? And they wanted to pass the buck to someone, I would take it already. And that's what the boss saw and said, okay, yeah, I'm going to pay you more. And someone made this comment to me because a customer had called. It wasn't that person's client, and they kind of gave him an answer over the phone, but didn't really want to follow up on it. And after the call was done, there was no other customers in the office, and the person just said, yeah, you know what? They don't pay me enough to care about that. And in my mind, it was like, a year ago, they didn't pay me enough to care about that, but I cared about it. And now they're paying me more. They don't pay you enough so that you care. They pay the people who care, all right? And the people who are wise, who are looking forward, things just work out better for them, okay? It's not that, oh, you're just lucky. No. I kind of made a plan. And it's not pride. I talked to a lot of counselors, and I humbled myself before God, and I put away that would be so much fun. Hey, there were other people. It's like, man, those people at college, I'm going off to work right after I get done with school, and I'm working for hours, and they're hanging out. Jacob, can you open the back door? There's a grandma coming in for one of their kids. Just help her in. I don't know if it's locked or not. There's other students, it's like, man, they're enjoying college life, this social thing, hanging out on campus. I wish I could do that. There's this building called the Oasis, and they got foosball tables in there, and you can get popcorn. There's this fountain machine in there. It's like, man, I'd love to, I think there's about 6 times in my college career that I went in there. Like the last day of semester, federal holidays where I wasn't working, things like that. I just never spent time there. Because I had to work full time while going to college full time. But then, years after that, when, some of my friends are still paying off student loans and struggling to get through, and it's like I own a house and I'm buying a second house and I didn't have to sell the first one to buy the second one, and I got renters there, and it's like, how are things going much better for me than them? Well, they enjoyed college more. But my path was easier after that. And it's not that they were sinful. It's just the path is made plain. If you're working hard for that, it's going to be easier. There's a clear path. Our plans are established, okay? Without counselors, purposes are disappointed, but in the multitude of counselors, they are established. If I want to get something done, I go talk to a lot of people, okay, and get a lot of counsel. What's the best way to do this? And not only do I have a better idea, you know what happens when you talk to about 20 people about what you want to do? Right? Adam came up and he talked to me, and a few other people, and he talked to a bunch of people about wanting to do a prayer meeting last Sunday. And you know what happened? Not only did people want to give him advice on how to do it, but a lot of those people said, hey, I'm coming with you. I'll help you out. Okay? And when you're talking to other people getting counsel, they're going to come and help you. Your plans are going to happen. Good words spoken with joy. When we seek wisdom, we'll have the right answer. A man shall have joy by the answer of his words. So many times people say stuff before they think, and they're like, I shouldn't have said that. I just lost my job. But I say, you know what? When I said that, it was just the right thing, and wow, that worked out really well. When we seek God, he'll give us the words to say when we need to say them, and things will work better. Okay? And we can have joy from the words that we say. And then lastly, and most important of all, is the way of life, the path of life. The ultimate reward, the long-term joy. Okay? Listen, if we are wise, we will have a lot of joy in this life here. We will. Maybe we won't have the other things that they have joy, but we are going to enjoy things in this life. But even if we didn't, Paul said this, I reckon, he was a Southerner, I reckon that the sufferings of this present life are not worthy to be compared to the glories that shall be revealed in us. He says, how the great it's going to be in heaven, the pain and the suffering we have this, We can't even compare it. It's not worthy to be compared. You can't put them on a scale because it's nothing. It's like nothing. All right? And we need to understand that. Wisdom is so much better than folly. Looking at the long term and having this wisdom, it's our desires that we're going to put the long term over the immediate. Right? Let's pray and we'll be done. Dear Lord, I thank you for your goodness and your grace. I pray that you'd help us as we go. Help us to be wise. Help us to put you first, and help us to look at tomorrow, not just the moment, but help us to look the long term. I pray that you get the glory for it all. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, you are dismissed.